performance metrics for each of your blockchain nodes. I am BlockBot.
All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for jumping on today. It is oh wow, it's Wednesday already, April 3rd. I feel like this year is flying by like crazy, but this is the right place for you to be because we're talking about obviously some of the greatest projects right now that are entering into the blockchain space. And today, I feel extremely privileged. We get to talk to some of the biggest contributors, those that have helped to launch the Grow blockchain from Grow United and its affiliated partners. And if you're new here to this space, I know we got a lot of new people, new individuals and names I can see here jumping on to this webinar today from all over the world. So I want to give you a huge shout out and welcome. It looks like we've got people coming in from Europe and Western Asia, a lot of different areas, which is really kind of cool to see that. So a huge welcome to you. If it's probably dinner time where you are, thanks for spending your dinner here with us today. My name is Stephen Miller. I am part of Connect, been part of this community for the last 6 years, and it has been a tremendous, tremendous experience being in this new and evolving space. This is a revolutionary time where technology is being used in a way that it's never been used before, giving opportunities to the individual to participate at a foundational level. We're going to get into what that means and what we're talking about. I'm sure that there are people here on the call who have been in the blockchain space probably even longer than I have. I've only been in here for 6 years or so. But it is changing the way that we do so many things. It's evolving and improving the way that we interact with one another, both in our local communities, but also on a global scale. It is tremendous. And today, specifically, we're here to talk about how blockchain technology is impacting the agricultural space. What are we doing, and what can blockchain do to really enhance, improve, and bring about massive needed improvement and change into an industry that honestly has kind of been in the same place, I feel like, for many, many years. I mean, there's been innovations and there's been different things, but in terms of putting the power back in the hands of the individual, we're starting to really kind of come to this changing moment right now. So I've got on with us today, we've got Will Taylor. Will Taylor, for many of you that know him, I mean, he's just an amazing character, a great guy, entrepreneur. He's been in the health and wellness arena now for the past many years, was an entrepreneur in the health and wellness space, a gym owner, helped coach other owners of gyms and different things to help improve their businesses, has just done a ton in the health and wellness space, and has now stepped in specifically into blockchain and health and wellness, blockchain and food, right? Things that we put into our bodies, of course. So Will, thank you so much for being with us today. I know that you've got a fellow cohort with you here today, Austin, who also, I think the community is very excited to hear from. If I remember correctly, if we rewind the clock back many years ago, you and Austin played rugby together, didn't you?
Yep. Austin and I met in college playing on the rugby field, and pretty much have been inseparable since. I keep trying to get rid of him, but he keeps following me around.
He just hangs on. Well, you know what? A couple kind of cool tidbits here about Austin. Austin has been in the farming industry for a long, long time, multi-generational farmer. It comes from a huge background of farmers and individuals that obviously are all about bringing better products out to the world. He owns, or as an owner, I think, of one of the biggest worm farms I've heard. Is that right? Well,
Yeah.
hopefully we'll hear a little bit.
I think we have his video disabled. Maybe
here, let me jump on just 1 second. I think I can enable that real quick. Here we go.
Austin's really pretty, everyone. So you're gonna want to see his face.
There we go. Hey,
he is.
You came prepared, cowboy hat and all. I love it. It was fantastic. Austin, thank you so much for being here. But biggest worm farm, one of the largest regenerative farms. I probably said that wrong. Anyway, in the world, as far as I understand, and hopefully we'll hear a little bit more about that as well. But guys, I won't take a whole lot more time. Obviously, we're gonna come back with some questions. The community is super excited to hear about what Grow United is doing in helping uh, put greater utility on the blockchain and make greater opportunity for people all over the world. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you first, Will, and then you can bring in Austin as needed. And thanks for being here, both of you.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. All right. So a lot of you in the Connect community have heard from me. You've heard me talk about blockchain. You've heard me talk about things like Farm Tracer, how we're tracking and tracing food and bringing that into what I believe is the most innovative technology on the planet right now with blockchain and AI. But the key to all of that is what we're doing with food. And so for those of you that have heard me before, you won't have to listen too much. I'm going to get Austin going on all of the amazing things that he's done. But before I turn it to him, I know there's some of you that haven't been here before, haven't heard about Grow. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and share my screen. And I want to show you what exactly we are trying to do and what we're trying to disrupt with the Grow blockchain. And then I'm gonna ask Austin some questions and let him dive into how all of this is happening on the ground outside of the tech. Let me share my screen here. And we'll start here. So welcome to the Grow blockchain. Like Steven said, in this Connect community, the whole goal of Connect is to bring the best real use case blockchain projects in the world and bring them to the people. And how do we actually decentralize that? So our goal with the Grow blockchain is to harness blockchain tech to nourish people, animals, and the planet. And Stephen already introduced me and Austin, but just so everyone knows, Austin and I have actually known each other forever. And if you look at these right two pictures, everything you see in the background is his daily view. That's his farm. And when my wife and I were very first married, we got married, and about 3 weeks later, we moved out and we lived in a single wide trailer in the middle of that field that you can see behind you. And it started what we're doing today. And one of the things that's really cool, you'll notice Austin and I will joke around with each other because we've just known each other for a very long time. But what we've been able to bring together in what he does on his farm to feed the world at scale and what we can bring with blockchain, for me and for us, is really one of the things that I think moves humanity as a collective forward. And it got me to leave my gym, and we co-founded together Grow United LLC to nourish people, animals, and the planet. And this is the piece I want everybody to see before we dive into Austin. The vision of the Grow blockchain is to decentralize the global ag and farming industry. And the reason that is because if you look at this graphic right here, there's essentially 10 centralized companies that run the entire food economy worldwide. And coming out of World War II, that was a good thing. There was still a lot of poverty. People were eating coming out of the war. And so we needed to get food in as many people's hands as possible. And we did that to a point. But now the producers of the food are no longer the hero of the story. They're being cut at a lot of different ways in the middle, from what they do to produce our food to us actually getting it. And then us as consumers, we don't know where our food comes from. So I'm going to make a bet with everyone on here, this Grow bet right here. If you listen to this whole webinar, and if you can tell me by the end where all of your food came from, what went into growing that food, where it came from, and the carbon footprint of that food, then make sure you message me after this webinar, and I'm going to get you a Grow node for doing that. But I'm going to turn it over to Austin. And Austin, maybe you could start, give us a little introduction and just teach us, like, what is regenerative farming, particularly at scale, in the way that you define it.
I will. I'll try not to cast a shadow on you because I'm way more articulate and better at talking than Will is in presenting. So this ought to be pretty good. Regenerative ag at scale. This is the concept that allows us as farmers to continue to grow life in a sustainable manner without a whole bunch of needs on synthetic inputs. So a lot of synthetic fertilizers, chemicals, trying to reduce our dependency on those so that when we're growing food, we can truly do that in a closed loop system within our own ecosystem. The trick to making that happen is to have cattle, farm, soil, bees. We got some chickens, worms, all of those different processes, part of this creation, and working them together in a symbiotic fashion. So you work those pieces together, you are going to, in a circular system, in a regenerative way, be able to produce food without having to be dependent on some of the models that we've gotten real comfortable with in agriculture, which really support that graph that you showed before of a centralized food system.
And so just some background on how Farm Tracer and we got it to the blockchain. It was probably been about 6 years ago, and I was running gyms, and Austin called me and he said, "Hey man, I'm a little fat. Can you help me?" And I said, "I guess I'll help you out." And in that process, we realized that food was the best thing for all of us to live a healthy life. And then we also realized that Austin and his family were growing some of the best food in the country, in the United States, using the best regenerative practices. And so Austin called and said, "Hey man, I want to be able to track and trace this. I want to be able to show that these regenerative practices that he just talked about were actually worth it in terms of it was creating better food and doing it in the best way possible." Austin, can you kind of go back to that time when you had the original idea to say, "I want to show the world what we're doing. I want to be able to track and trace it," and why that was important to you back then?
Yeah, I think it starts with, there's two sides of the spectrum. One side of the spectrum is, as consumers, we are so uneducated. Uneducated is wrong, maybe disconnected. I mean, progressively the generations are getting less and less connected to a farm, and thus more and more ignorant to how their food's grown and where it comes from. That creates a number of different challenges. On one side of the spectrum, it creates ignorance in buying food that's not good for you. But on the other side of the spectrum, it gives you opinions on ways we are growing food that might be the best practices. And so all of that summed into transparency and complete traceability is the only way for us to kind of conquer just the reality that most people have never been on a farm, and that most people have no idea how cows are grown or food is grown. So we could talk about the labeling system, but I'll summarize it like this. The American labeling system is the best in the world. It is broke. When you read labels on your food, bullshit is what comes to mind. And I can say that word because I work with it. It isn't exactly what you think it is. So again, it goes back to transparency, traceability. That's where it started, Will, as you well know. Blockchain wasn't a part of my vocabulary back then, but it was, I'm producing these foods. We have a lot of the processing in-house. We can trace that process and share that with the end consumer. We now know that's blockchain, and that's what we're diving deeper into.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to show everyone. So if you can see your screen, I'm going to pull up actually here what Austin built and show you exactly how it works. But I'm going to give you a sneak peek of my text messages. So nobody go through my phone and steal my numbers. But just, 12:09. So this was when this started. One sec. I think you can't see my screen yet.
Send the pictures we just took. Charles and I took these pictures literally 20 minutes ago. We're coming back from the processing facility where we process the beef that we grew. So
this is real time. So sometimes when we talk about the Connect community getting things first, this is 20 minutes ago and a chat that's going on while we're actually having this webinar. So these cuts of meat right here that you're seeing with these QR codes and IDs, this is Austin's ability on his farm, leveraging the Farm Tracer app that is now inside of the Grow blockchain to actually know everything that goes on inside of this meat and to get this meat to our table. So you see these QR codes, you can see all these different cuts of meat that we're running through right now. And then if I go to Farm Tracer and you scan that QR code, it would either, or I could put in the animal ID, I could trace that, and then I could see exactly where that cow was born, where it was grown, the breed, the conversion, the diet of that cow down to 1/2 pound, and the carbon footprint of that cow, as well as a video from the producer of that cow, which you guys are all seeing right now in all his glory, Austin Allred. And so this is the beginning of being able to fix that labeling problem and the awareness problem that we have of what goes into our food and how does it get to us as the end consumer. And so I just think it's really cool that you all are here right now. We got almost over 100 people watching this in real time happen, be created, and be put on the blockchain. And so when you talk about how are we going to use blockchain in the real world, this is it, to do it in the food that somebody's going to be eating tonight. And one of the things that you see in here as you look at Farm Tracer is you see the carbon footprint of this cow. And Austin, maybe if you could go into a little bit of how regenerative farming and the way that you're doing it, particularly with your dairy and beef cows, is able to nourish the environment in creating carbon credits and what that even means for us lay people.
How long do you want me to take?
As long as you want, man.
No, I'll try to be quick. I'll summarize this. But what you hear about cows is 1/2 of the formula, and it is accurate. Cows emit. The ruminant is an incredible process that takes grasses and products that we cannot eat and turns it into protein. But there is an emission associated with that process. And those emissions come from 3 parts. One, it's called enteric emissions. That's the same we have enteric. Your burps, cows don't fart. 4-part stomachs don't have it out the back end, but there is some burping and associated methane and GHG emissions when you're making that protein. That's one section of emissions. Second is general management. We use diesel. We use diesel for everything on the farm pretty much except the electric truck I'm in right now. Other than that though, diesel is critical for large horsepower efficient production. The third part is manure management. Wet piles of manure eventually convert to methane and emit methane into the air. Go back to the very beginning of what I said. Farmers are growing life. All of that methane, all of those greenhouse gases are critical to the next generation of life and crops in our soil. So what we are doing, so that's one side of the formula. Just to stick to the formula, you got cattle, they emit, that's where that 2.6 is. 2.6 ton CO2 equivalent tons is what that animal, 6.4, 6.41 or whatever it was, emitted in its lifetime. So that's based on what it ate. That's based on its production. That's pretty dang small because of our practices. But there is emissions associated with it. On the other side of that, though, when you integrate that animal into its natural symbiotic systems in our ecosystem, aka you work that cow with the soil in the right way, then that soil will now have a greater capacity to sequester carbon and to pull carbon out of the air and to work within a sustainable model so that that animal's relationship with the soil is what is growing more crops instead of our impact on synthetic fertilizers on that soil. So that's the other side of the formula. I don't remember the numbers, but I think it's actually 2.4 was the emissions, 2.6 was the sequestration associated with the food that animal ate. So because that animal has a symbiotic relationship with the soil, with the grasses you're growing for the consumption of that for that animal, which is going to become protein, then you put that in the same formula. And at the end of the day, that animal's net emissions is negative because of its existence and its regenerative existence in that ecosystem. Then you have a net negative on that animal's total footprint. So it's really about the symbiosis of cattle and soil, and as farmers, us working together in that model in order to have a carbon negative system, which again, to emphasize, is only beneficial to the farmer because that's less inputs we have to buy to build those nutrients in our soil. So we are able to capture those gases, which they're not gases yet, but we're able to capture them before their gases emitted, put that into our soil, and be more sustainable and more productive in our growing of food.
I love it. When you went back to tracking this, like you say that you can see this entire process. Why were you willing to start putting this data and making it public for everything that you're doing on your farm? Because I remember, just so everyone knows, like I spend a lot of time talking to farmers and producers, and there are many who are not willing to go through the work that Austin has done to, one, identify and define the process that he just shared with us, and then two, making it available in what we would call a blockchain way, open to the world. Why did you do that?
So let me tackle one first. The first one is because I had a thesis that cows weren't inevitably bad. It wasn't the cow, it's the how. That cows are a huge part of a good natural ecosystem in a balanced environment. So that was why I wanted to dive into it deeper. But two, the reason why farmers are so unwilling to do this is because of the centralized system. So farmers, probably even more than you on this call, more than most people, are fed up with being told how to grow food. And so how to summarize this is, most farmers don't trust their data with anybody. So to turn over this data into a centralized system is fundamentally against a principle of most farmers, including myself. Hence, I had my own database in my own system that I was sharing at the beginning. And that's just the segue into the decentralized model that blockchain offers, which doesn't just open this up for me as far as scaling it, but now you have a decentralized model that can support farmers in a way that they will fit into, because they will not give this data to the USDA or to anybody for that matter, because that's just not a winning strategy when you're talking with farmers, because the centralized system has burned them, just like it's burned a lot of us so much.
Love it. Love it. Because I think that answers one of the questions that came through is, we look at this particularly in the United States, right? Austin, I'm in Utah right now. Austin's in Washington. This is where we started, but we are working at feeding the world at scale. And something you and I talk about a lot, Austin, is something I've broken down to, as I explain it, feeding our communities and then feeding the world at scale. And there's a difference there. And you think and spend a lot of time on feeding the world at scale and globally. And so can you talk a little bit to how you see this process and the problems and solutions that we need to be looking at to feed the world at scale with the healthiest and most nutrient dense food?
Yeah, I think there's a macro concept when you're talking about really sustainable food systems, and there's an efficiency there, right? We cannot get to a point where we are thinking that we don't need commercial agriculture. I mean, we do. We need to continue to feed the world, and really, in that conversation, we're talking about maybe the most vulnerable in our populations. It's the people who would go hungry first, that we cannot afford to just jump into a whole different model away from commercial ag, because we are so terribly efficient at growing food and getting it to people in the centralized system that we can't just burn it as far as that goes. But what we need to do is from a macro standpoint, is to really look at localizing this system. So, and again, this is something that's impossible to do without this mega data, without this blockchain. But you look at the nutrients that the populations in our segment and the nutrients that population needs, and then you have blockchain for your food, and you're able to make sure that you can provide those nutrients in a geographical area and then beyond, which is so important that we continue to feed the people. And to be able to do that sustainably needs to focus on a localized system. But in order to do that, we need to totally turn everything upside down and blockchain decentralize how it all works.
Amazing. And I would add to that, as we go global with Grow, a lot of G's there, the key is to getting producers to follow the lead of farmers like Austin and the Allred family at Royal Family Farming, to then open source this data in a way where we can see what is the best way to grow. Because raising animals and farming in Australia, Saudi Arabia, Royal City, Washington versus Arizona is different. Now, there's principles of regenerative farming that can be used, but as we come in as producers and put in that data, then we start to see, okay, this is the best way to nourish people, animals, and the planet from where I live. And then that can be expanded upon. And if you have a global open source decentralized blockchain, then everyone is then willing to put in that data because it's not going to some centralized corporation. And so that is the goal. And hopefully, I think it was John T that asked that question, answers, how do we go global? And the other part that I want to add on to that is I would venture to guess that there's a couple producers. There's usually a few farmers that show up to these calls, but most of us are consumers. And I live in that consumer space to where I got to eat. And I guarantee most of you have eaten in the last 4 days. I had one guy get on a call that was fasting for 5 days, but most of us got to eat every week, right? How do we help that? How do we go in to incentivize in a way the farmers to then come into the blockchain, use Farm Tracer, and put their data in an open way? We eat that food. And so I just saw a question come through. Can I use the app now? Yeah, you can go to farmtracer.com right now. You can scan one of those QR codes of the picture. My mom was actually visiting from South Korea in Oregon about 6 weeks ago. And the food in the restaurant that she was eating actually came from a Farm Tracer partner. And so while she was waiting for her food, she scanned the QR code and she got to see where her food was coming from. So yes, you can use the app now. It exists. And what we're working on is building more and more producers to come on and use this technology. And so how can you, as a consumer or somebody listening to this that resonates, that is not a producer, you can start to buy food from our Farm Tracer partners, and that is coming. And so here in Q2 of this year, you will be able to actually go to the Grow blockchain and be pointed to partners like Royal Family Farming that will then ship their Farm Trace food nationwide with some products and globally on others. And we currently have a wait list of farms and producers from around the world working on Asia, Europe, Australia right now to come on, put their food into our platform and allow us to not only use our fiat currency, but also use the Grow token in exchange for that food. And the app is free. I just saw that question come through. The app is completely free. You can use it. The goal is we just want to expand what we're doing. Question for you, Austin, that I just think is really cool. And Steven mentioned this earlier about your worm farm. So Austin has, if not the biggest, one of the biggest, but I believe it's the biggest worm farm in the world, that at least in the United States. Can you tell us a little bit about that worm farm, Austin, and what goes into it and what it does?
So if you want to picture the worm farm, we have a few different aspects to it, but the general aspect is picture about 15 acres of long, skinny swimming pools, lap pools that are 5 feet deep. And in these swimming pools, we have 1.5 feet of rock and about 3.5 feet of wood chips. Those wood chips are coming from our retired orchard trees. So most of you haven't bought a Red Delicious apple in the last couple of years. You're buying the Cosmic Crisp. Well, what that means on the farm side is we're ripping out those Red Delicious apples, chipping that, and we're putting it into these worm farms, these swimming pools. And then we're planting more Cosmic Crisp variety apples. So picture 15 acres of long, skinny swimming pools full of wood chips. We then inoculate these wood chips with 60, 70, 100 million worms. Well, we inoculate them with a few thousand worms. And then we feed these worms our dirty water, the water that comes in contact with our manure, which we call it green water. So it's dirty water. It's like what, our municipality has nothing to do with human waste, but it's cow waste. It's the liquid cow waste, and it's the water we use to wash down our systems, to clean the manure out of our barns, yada, yada, yada. That water comes out of a cool spring system that then settles through these swimming pools, these wood chips filled with worms, settles through. We collect that water off the bottom, and at that point, it's clean enough for us to reuse. So we reuse that water 10, 100 times on our farm. We'll irrigate with the water when we need to get rid of it. So we'll put it back in the soil to grow more crops. So that's what the worm farm's doing. It's cleaning water, but as a result, these wood chips are being digested by worms. So at this point, because the worms will double their population every couple months, at this point, we got 100 million worms. And those worms are crawling through these wood chips, eating the nutrients out of the water, eating the wood chips. And what a worm does, a ruminant, a cow, takes grass and turns it into protein. That's its magic. A worm takes one microbial and turns it into 7 microbials. And in that process, we're building a really ridiculous soil amendment that we can then use back in our soils to grow crops, all independent of imports. So we'll harvest those worms, we'll harvest those wood chips, which are now worm castings, worm poop, and we'll then take that and we'll apply it to our soils to create that natural ecosystem, which will then in turn grow more crops.
I love it. And in that process, you have what's called a carbon credit. And as I talk about grow, and I talk about one of the things we're doing is you have this emerging carbon credit market that I view as a reward to farmers for using these best regenerative practices, and is a market that's going to continue to grow with a lot of issues that the blockchain can solve. Can you just talk briefly on how the worm farm and other practices that you're doing have led to your ability to create carbon credits and then also monetize those carbon credits to add another revenue stream for you as a producer and farmer?
There's types of carbon credits. One is called a mitigation credit, and that means from one year to the next, you implemented practices on your farm to reduce emissions and promote utilization of those greenhouse gases, aka putting them back into the soil. So that's called a mitigation credit. The second credit is called a sequestration credit, and that is the concept that the way I treat my soils is actually going to facilitate greater soil carbon sequestration. So essentially pulling nutrients, nitrogen, carbon out of the air and putting that into your soils. So that's the second type of credit. So we're selling both types of credits, but there's 2 ways to sell credits. So does that, Will, do you feel like that covers credits, like how that works? So now there's 2 ways to sell them. You can sell them via insets or via offsets. So an offset, which I'm not a huge fan of, to be honest, is me selling those credits to Microsoft. And then when Microsoft, should I not use names maybe? Me selling those credits outside of my supply chain. So people that have nothing to do with food or my food or our food are then able to take those credits and say, hey, look you over here, we're saving the world. We haven't done anything, invest a little bit of money into credits. What I do is I sell insets. So I use food systems within my supply chain, and I apply those credits to our brands. And so then when you have a branded food product, you can actually see its true carbon number because those credits can be then applied through the supply chain to that credit. So it's another world, obviously, talking like this, people who understand, which I think most of you understand the blockchain and how it works. It's another world that is really blown up when you talk blockchain and you talk transparency. Because now this carbon can actually find the food or travel with the food through the supply chain because the technology supports that. Whereas the typical system is farmers or others who are doing these practices. Yeah, it's great. We can go get paid by some company who wants to make a claim, but it doesn't really support the bigger picture good the same way that I think these insets and applying them with the blockchain can do.
So I've got a question real quick, and this, Austin, you or Will, we've got someone who asked, and this is just kind of maybe a side note, but you had mentioned the carbon footprint of a cow that was on a regenerative farm. Is that different from a cow that is not on a regenerative farm? Is that a higher carbon footprint potentially for that cow? Do you know what that would be?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of different ways to grow cows. And there is like to speak to it from a very high level, you want to localize your system. That's the most important piece. So, feedlots are not inherently bad, in my opinion. You can't categorize it too quickly, because although it's not the cow, it's the how. It's more about localizing that system and making sure you're feeding that cow with its natural processes. Mm-hmm. So the answer is yes. When you start bringing, like, I'm in Washington, if I buy all my corn from the Midwest, which is oftentimes the cheapest way to do it, put it on a rail car and bring 100 cars over and feed cows that corn, that might make some financial sense in certain scenarios, but that is obviously not the best thing for the cow or for that total footprint of that animal. So I don't know if that answered the question very well. If I answered it deeper than that, I'd probably start talking for another 10 minutes.
No, you're good. And I've heard a couple things about government regulation coming down. Is there government involvement right now that's starting to force some of this transparency, or are we in a good spot right now with where we are based on that? Is that just hearsay or rumor, or do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's on the news right now is if you're paying attention, that the labeling system for our meat is getting adjusted. So I'm not tracking it that well because our meat is on Farm Tracer, so I'm not overly concerned. But for the fact of the matter is, when you saw USA beef on your meat up to a couple of weeks ago, that meant very, very, very little, because there is, like every law, there is a way around that. And so what the mega producers were doing is they're bringing carcasses out of Brazil, et cetera, to the States to cut them down. And as long as you put them in their package in USA with a USDA inspection, that's USA beef, which is totally counter of what what we think or what it should be. So yeah, it's broken all over. We're trying to fix it, but you can't fix it with laws. The tax code has proven that. If you don't want rich people to pay taxes, you have to change the tax code. But it's fundamentally not the way to accomplish what we need to accomplish. We need to accomplish it through transparency and through blockchain. It's my opinion.
Awesome.
One of the things to kind of add on that, I was in a meeting yesterday talking more about the carbon neutral side, particularly in places in Europe and EU, where they are now going to levy additional taxes on top of the producers if they cannot prove that they are working towards being more carbon neutral. And so as you look at the landscape in general worldwide, there are regulations that are coming in different ways or changes being made that lead to, we need more transparency. And one of the craziest part of the conversation I had yesterday was this new taxation was coming down and no farmer knows how to comply with it. And so the government who was regulating the change didn't provide the solution. And so we feel like we're in a really good position that if you have a base level to decentralize the data that then allows people to use it, you just heard Austin say it as one of the biggest producers in the United States that says, I'm not overly worried about it because I'm already using Farm Tracer, which then allows you to then kind of fit into wherever the regulations are and puts you in a better place. And so that's kind of our goal, is when we think about it, we don't control the centralized regulators and what they're going to do, but we can provide an easy way for people to comply kind of regardless of what comes through. And so that's kind of where our thought process goes a lot on that question.
Transparency is the answer.
Yeah, I love that. Another question that kind of came through is, will everything that's purchased or, kind of associated with grow, will that be considered organic, or is that maybe the wrong question or the wrong conversation? Does that even matter at this point?
You want me to take that, Will?
Yeah, do it.
So to me, in my mind, there's two different organics. There's USDA certified organic, which very much gets into these regulations, and a blanket fix, which, again, I can go 10 minutes well, more than that on that concept. But to get into growing organically and within your natural systems using the right technology, that's what the transparency is going to offer. So do I only grow USDA certified organic crops? No, I don't. I grow non-certified organic crops, but we do it in a regenerative way because, in my opinion, those aren't always overlapped.
So if I understand you right, it basically, and maybe I'm surmising, but basically what you said was, the term organic or USDA certified organic does not necessarily make it better for you or better overall in general than something that is done in a regenerative type of fashion. Did I understand that right?
Without me totally like throwing my opinion at everybody, yes.
Hey,
A
you're the
resounding
expert.
yes.
You're allowed to throw all your opinions all over the place, whatever you want to.
It goes back to the previous conversation. USDA certified organic is very much a regulatory system now, which goes to the same issues that any regulatory system is going to offer us, and it's very problematic.
No, I love that. Well, golly, there's just been so much great information. The last 40 minutes have been tremendous, and we've had some amazing comments from people. I think the biggest thing, well, not the biggest thing, but something that kind of keeps coming up is, where can I buy this beef now? Like, where can I go to find this now? What can I do to get that? Is that available to purchase on Farm Tracer currently, or is that just to kind of see, or where would someone go if they wanted to kind of participate and purchase right now?
Perfect. That's a great question. So we are right now, our goal in Q2, we've been working for the last year and a half on the blockchain side, the tracing side, and now it is all coming to where it comes to us as the consumers. So what you need to do is be connected, pun intended there, in the Connect Discord around Grow. And those pictures that I showed you all at the beginning of this is the first run of beef to allow us to start shipping all around the world. And so that is coming, and you'll be the first to know inside of this community of where you can do it. And I saw another question, if I can just answer really quick, of how can you help? Like, as a Grow community member, as a Connect community member, how can you help get farmers on board? How can you help grow it in Asia, the Middle East, Africa, or some things that I saw through? And I want to speak to that a little bit. I mentioned earlier that the way that anything moves, particularly when you're trying to get producers to adjust their habits, they still have costs. They've got to run their farms. They've got to be able to pay for it. And so the number one thing that we can do as we start to scale and launch and give you access to food and farmers like Austin is to use your hard-earned dollars as votes and buy that food, because that's going to prove that we as the world are willing to spend our dollars on this food to then feed ourselves, and that will continue to grow it. The second side of that is all of you on this call are probably familiar with nodes, or the network to run the blockchain. If we don't have nodes that are running and actively running the blockchain, we just have the same centralized system that we're fighting against because they're run on central servers, and that is not the model. As you heard Austin say, this data that is so valuable, that changes the entire game of how food is produced now and for the next 100 years, stems from a foundation of decentralized, non-centralized owned data, because that's the only way that producers and farmers are going to put their data out. And so in order for us to have that, we must have nodes. And so I know many of you on this call are already running Grow nodes, but that's the other side of it, is go through Connect, run a Grow node, and help us take all of that data that we're doing, keep it decentralized, keep it open source, and allow us to find the best practices that grow the whole world.
I love that. I know I'm running mine, and that's so exciting to me to be able to support this kind of infrastructure for Grow and what Grow is doing and how it's building. I often talk about or think about all of these different things that we deal with every single day. And for example, like a cell phone, like everyone has a cell phone, everyone's going to use that cell phone every day. Very few people own a cell phone tower. And this is one of those rare occasions where you can not only purchase the food that's being created and provided for this amazing system, but you can be part of the infrastructure supporting and helping to grow that ecosystem into a global community. And, being able to participate on both sides of the fence, I think for me is where the real power is, because now not only am I incentivized to go out and eat healthier food and get that food that's traced and is real, but I can benefit on the other end of it as well, right? So I can kind of take part in both sides of that. That's just tremendous. So I think that's the invitation. That's like the call to action here is for those of you that want to eat healthier, jump on, and as soon as it's made available, start buying your meat, other products that are, as they're made available, start buying those products through the Grow blockchain and its affiliated partners. And then number two, not necessarily in order here, but the second thing is, if you don't have a Grow node or multiple Grow nodes already, get in, buy some Grow nodes, operate those Grow nodes, and support the ecosystem. By doing so, again, you're incentivizing yourself to buy healthier, right? Do better, which I just love. Will and Austin, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for taking your time with us. We've got some minutes left. What are there any kind of final thoughts or things that you feel like we didn't cover that we maybe need to cover and let people know to help them understand why they would want to participate here with Grow?
I'm gonna let Austin cap us off. To me, it's really cool to watch what has happened. As most of you, I've already said, I've known Austin for over a decade, and watching him grow his farm, be a leader in this space, and take steps kind of into the darkness to lead the way where he didn't know why he was doing it. And it all leads to truly changing the world in a positive way. So Austin, thanks for being here, man. As you guys can see, he's the real deal. He's not in an office. He's not in a pretty building in the middle of anywhere. He's in his truck because he's doing the work. He's making the food. He's doing it the way. And my goal is to make sure that all of us that aren't doing that are aware of what goes into it. Because just when you change the awareness and you start having some more respect that I think we've lost as a world and as people, it goes back to everything gets better. So thanks for being here, Austin, and I'll let you cap us off with anything you got.
You're going to make me blush, Will. It's not like you. So I've gone to a lot of these regenerative ag conferences, and I'll just close with a couple things. There is a lot of hype around growing our food better, and it's really exciting, these regenerative practices and what we're learning. Most of those conferences have very few farmers, and most of what you have, which is okay, but most of what you have is the big centralized food systems that are sponsoring those, who are then up there telling about what they're going to do. And it's a lot of the same. What the blockchain does is it overarches all of that and allows us to totally adjust the food system. The reason I am so committed to this, like Will has shared, and so excited about it, is because I don't see another answer except to totally decentralize and flop this around. There's a lot of cool concepts. There's a lot of money in the food sector that can make some adjustments, make some new labels, yada, 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 yada. But at the end of the day, until we can totally adjust our model using a decentralized system, using the blockchain, then we're just going to get a lot of more of the same wrapped up in different package to market to the consumer a little bit differently. That just continues kind of the ignorance. We've got to stop that. And this, to me, is the answer to all those awesome concepts. You've got to throw in the decentralized system in order to accomplish what we truly need to accomplish, which is transparency and helping people really know about their food, even though it's not realistic that 99% of the people who aren't farmers are going to all of a sudden become farmers.
Yeah. That is amazing. You guys, again, thanks again. One thing I do want to mention real quick, we got Jody here on the call who just typed in and said, just bought a node. Excited, great project there. You guys are amazing. Guys, be if you want to participate, it's really simple. Get back with the person that invited you to this call. Get that link to get in and purchase your node. Start operating that node. I do want to say this. There are a limited number of nodes. So there are only 100,000 nodes that will ever be available on that side of the fence, right? On this side of the project. And so if you want to participate, get in as quickly as you can. This project is getting global recognition very, very fast. And we're seeing that happen right now, which is really exciting. Someone said, what does that mean? Only 100,000? There are only 100,000 nodes, smart nodes available. So there's a limit on how many smart nodes are available to support the blockchain on that side. Of course, everyone around the world is going to be able to use the different apps and systems that are built on the Grow blockchain, but there will only ever be 100,000 supportive nodes that can then mine and earn those digital rewards associated with the Grow blockchain. So anyway, with that, everyone, thank you so much for jumping on. You guys are amazing. Appreciate you again, Will and Austin, for taking your time out of your day. I know that you guys are both super busy as you're helping not only to support and grow the blockchain and the different apps that are being built upon the blockchain, but literally putting the pieces together so that this whole entire system works and people can have greater access and more information around the food that they eat. So thank you for all that you're both doing, and thanks for being on with us today.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. We'll see you later. Thank you.